A gray morning sky hung low over the Welsh coast. Airfield crews scanned the horizon, expecting friendly silhouettes returning from patrol. Instead, a lone speck cut through the clouds, fast, deliberate, and unfamiliar. Engines roared as the aircraft descended, its wings marked not with roundels of blue and red, but black crosses of the Luftwaffe. No alarms sounded. No guns opened fire. It glided down with the calm precision of a pilot who believed he was home. The fighter touched the grass, rolled to a stop, and for a heartbeat, silence covered the airfield. Then the canopy slid open. A young German officer climbed out, removed his helmet, and froze. The insignias were wrong. The planes parked nearby were wrong. The uniforms sprinting toward him were unmistakably British. He had landed in enemy territory. What no one yet realized was that this moment, one pilot's navigational mistake had just handed Britain the crown jewel of German aviation, the Focke-Wulf 190. For months, it had dominated the skies, shredding Allied squadrons and outclassing every fighter that dared to challenge it. Now, the Allies would finally see what made the mysterious machine so deadly, and in doing so, would uncover the secret that would turn the tide of the air war over Europe. For months in 1942, Allied pilots spoke of a shadow that ruled the skies, a phantom that struck without warning, rolled away from danger, and vanished into the clouds before anyone could touch it. Its name was whispered with a kind of reluctant awe, the Focke-Wulf 190. When the new German fighter first appeared over the French coast in late 1941, few believed the reports. A radial engine aircraft outpacing a Spitfire? Impossible, they said. But by spring the following year, disbelief had turned to dread. From the first encounters, it was clear something extraordinary had entered the war. RAF pilots described a machine that climbed like a hawk and rolled like nothing they had ever seen. Squadron leader James Edgar "Johnny" Johnson, who would later become Britain's top-scoring ace, recalled his first engagement with one in chilling terms: "It could outroll us, outdive us, and its firepower was devastating. We were comprehensively outclassed." Those words echoed through RAF mess halls across southern England. The Spitfire MKV, once the pride of fighter command, was suddenly prey. Between January and June 1942, British losses over occupied France soared. Veteran pilots, the same men who had held the line during the Battle of Britain, were being torn from the sky by a machine that seemed untouchable. Its 20mm cannons ripped through wings and fuselages with mechanical precision, and even the most skilled Allied pilots found themselves outmaneuvered. The statistics told the story no one wanted to admit. In half a year, RAF fighter losses had doubled. Morale was faltering. And behind closed doors, intelligence officers were asking the question that would haunt them for months: what is this thing? American pilots arriving in Britain with their bulky P-47 Thunderbolts were warned immediately. Don't turn with it. Don't dive after it. Don't try to outroll it. The FW-190 had rewritten the rules of combat, and no one seemed to have the answers for the Allied High Command. The situation was as humiliating as it was dangerous. They could not design countermeasures without understanding what made the new fighter so lethal. But the problem was cruelly simple. Every FW-190 shot down over England was either shredded or burned beyond recognition. No one had a single, intact specimen to study until fate intervened. On the morning of June 23, 1942, a 21-year-old Luftwaffe pilot named Oberleutnant Armin Faber, prepared for what should have been a routine mission. A member of Jagdgeschwader II Richthofen, one of Germany's elite fighter wings, Faber had already proven himself in combat. He was young, confident, and skilled, exactly the kind of pilot Germany's propaganda loved to celebrate. His task that day was simple: escort bombers across the English Channel and protect them from RAF interception. The weather was patchy, thick layers of cloud drifting over the coast, but visibility was good enough for a formation flying dot as the German formation reached the Western Channel. British fighters rose to meet them. For several minutes, the sky became a chaos of crossing contrails and cannon flashes. Faber's FW-190 twisted and rolled, firing bursts into a climbing Spitfire before banking sharply to avoid return fire. Then, something happened. Perhaps it was the glare of the sun reflecting off the water, or the heavy cloud that swallowed the horizon. Perhaps it was the sheer intensity of combat, the violent turns, the bursts of acceleration that left pilots gasping for breath. Whatever the cause, Faber lost his sense of direction. He believed he was heading south, toward occupied France. In reality, his aircraft had swung through a wide 180-degree arc and was now flying north. Deeper into enemy airspace, when he broke through the clouds, he saw coastline below, green fields, a broad beach, and what looked like a friendly airstrip. The markings were unfamiliar, but in the confusion of battle, it hardly mattered. He had made it back across the channel, or so he thought. As he circled for landing, the airfield crew below froze. They watched in disbelief as a German fighter, one of the Luftwaffe's most feared aircraft, descended smoothly onto their runway. For a moment, even the ground crews hesitated, thinking it must be some kind of test or captured machine being returned. Then the truth dawned: the airfield wasn't in France. It was RAF Pembry in Wales. Faber touched down gracefully, his aircraft rolling to a stop near the control tower. He slid back the canopy, removed his helmet, and looked around, expecting to see Luftwaffe ground crew. Instead, he saw blue uniforms, Spitfires parked along the line. British flags. For a brief suspended moment he froze. Then instinct kicked in. He tried to restart the engine, but it coughed and died. RAF personnel were already sprinting toward him, rifles in hand. By the time he climbed out of the cockpit, the realization had settled over him like ice. He hadn't landed in safety. He had just delivered Germany's most secret weapon straight into British hands. The news spread through RAF Fighter Command like wildfire. After months of terror, the impossible had happened. A fully operational FW-190 was sitting intact on a British airfield. Air Chief Marshal Sholto Douglas, head of Fighter Command, immediately ordered the aircraft to be transported under guard to the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnboro. Every bolt, every circuit, every inch of its airframe would be studied. Finally, the Allies would know what they were up against. For the men at RAF Pembry, it felt like a miracle, or perhaps poetic justice. Months of suffering under the German butcherbird had ended with its own pilot. Handing one over by mistake, what they didn't yet realize was how much that mistake would change the war. Within weeks, the captured FW-190 would reveal its secrets, its strengths, its weaknesses, and its vulnerabilities, transforming Allied fighter tactics for the rest of the conflict. And it had all begun because one exhausted, overconfident pilot misread the sky. When the RAF lorry carrying the captured Focke-Wulf 190 rolled through the gates of Farnboro Airfield, the mood was electric. To the intelligence officers and engineers waiting on the tarmac, it was as if an alien craft had just landed. After months of frustration, they finally had the Phantom in their hands. The plane looked unlike anything in British service. Its broad wings, squat stance, and muscular radial engine gave it a predatory, almost menacing profile. Even standing still, it looked fast, painted in mottled gray and green. Its fuselage bore the black cross of the Luftwaffe, a chilling reminder that just days earlier, this machine had been tearing Allied aircraft from the sky. As mechanics began their inspection, the first impressions were unanimous. This wasn't just another fighter, it was a masterpiece of German engineering. The engineers at Farnboro began with the heart of the machine, the BMW-801D2, a 14-cylinder twin-row radial engine delivering nearly 1,700 horsepower. It was heavy, rugged, and astonishingly efficient. Unlike the sleek, narrow inline engines used in British and American fighters, this radial design was air-cooled, eliminating the need for vulnerable coolant lines. One lucky bullet in a Spitfire's radiator could cripple it. In the Focke-Wulf, there was no such weakness. Then came the cockpit. Test pilots were stunned by its ergonomics and visibility. The controls were logically arranged, the seat high and centered for superior field of view. Everything the pilot needed, gun sight, throttle, flap lever, was positioned within easy reach. The canopy itself provided almost panoramic visibility, something Allied pilots had long envied, but it was the flight performance that would leave the deepest impression. When Captain Eric Winkelbrown, one of Britain's most experienced test pilots, took the FW-190 aloft for the first time, he knew instantly that this was no ordinary aircraft. The roll rate was blisteringly fast, nearly twice that of the Spitfire. MKV, the controls were light and responsive even at high speed, and the climb performance was exceptional. Brown later described it simply, "It was the best controlled aeroplane of the war." The pilot became part of it. The test reports confirmed what frontline pilots already knew. The FW-190 had changed the rules of air combat. It could dive steeper, climb faster, and turn sharper at high speeds than anything the RAF had. The Spitfire's elegance met the Focke-Wulf's brutality. And elegance was losing. In war, knowledge is as deadly as any weapon. Armed with the captured fighter's secrets, British and American engineers worked day and night to level the playing field. They studied the engine's cooling system, its automatic mixture controls, and its compact layout innovations that made maintenance faster and combat performance higher. They even discovered a feature that astonished them: a manual engine control system that automatically adjusted power and propeller pitch for optimum efficiency, a feature no Allied fighter possessed at the time. Every element of the FW-190 spoke of ruthless practicality. Where British design philosophy emphasized balance and beauty, the Germans had built for dominance and survivability, but the Allies weren't content to admire their enemy's work. They intended to beat it. At Supermarin's Design Bureau, engineers were already deep into a new version of their legendary fighter. The Spitfire MKX, fitted with a powerful two-stage Merlin 61 engine, was rushed into production. It wasn't originally part of the plan. It was a stopgap, a desperate answer to the butcher bird. Within weeks of the captured FW-190's analysis, RAF squadrons were flying MKXs in combat. And finally, for the first time in months, the tables began to turn. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American engineers were equally fascinated. The U.S. Army Air Forces requested detailed reports and photographs from Farnboro, wanting to understand why the German fighter outperformed the P-40 in early Thunderbolt models. When American test pilots got their own chance to fly the captured 190, they were impressed and alarmed. Its acceleration in a dive was incredible, and its maneuverability at low altitude unmatched. The findings directly influenced design improvements in the P-47, Thunderbolt, and P-51 Mustang. Aircraft that would eventually dominate the skies of Europe. The FW-190 unintentionally became the teacher that shaped its enemies. For the Luftwaffe, the capture was a quiet disaster. They didn't realize at first how significant Faber's mistake was. But within months, Allied tactics began changing. Spitfire pilots learned to exploit the 190's weaknesses, its heavier control feel at high altitudes, and its tendency to lose power above 25,000 feet. Squadrons began operating in mixed formations, pairing MKX Spitfires as high cover against FW-190 sweeps. By late 1942, air combat over the Channel was no longer a slaughter, it was a duel. The Allies had learned the hard way. But they had learned fast. In hindsight, historians often call Faber's landing one of the most fortunate mistakes of the Second World War. It changed the balance of aerial power, accelerated Allied aircraft development by months, perhaps even years, and offered a rare psychological victory at a time when the skies felt hopeless. For Armin Faber himself, the consequences were complex. He spent the rest of the war as a prisoner in Britain, interrogated, studied, but treated with surprising respect. His accidental surrender was used by the Allies as propaganda, while the Luftwaffe tried to bury the embarrassment. Faber would survive the war, living quietly in Germany until his death decades later, but the machine he delivered, unscathed, unburned, and filled with secrets, became one of the most important trophies of the entire conflict. The FW-190's arrival at Farnboro marked more than a stroke of luck. It was a turning point, a moment when Allied science, engineering, and courage fused to reclaim the skies. From that point on, every new Spitfire, every Mustang, every Thunderbolt carried a little bit of the Butcherbird's DNA, proof that even in war, learning from your enemy can be the most powerful weapon of all. By the winter of 1942, the Allies had finally learned to breathe again. The terror that had ruled the skies over the Channel, the German Focke-Wulf 190, the Butcherbird, was no longer invincible. The aircraft that once seemed to slice through Spitfires like a hawk through doves was now being matched, move for move, by the new Spitfire Mk9 and the rising stars of American aviation, but the story of the FW-190 didn't end with its capture. In many ways, that was where its real influence began. At the Royal Aircraft Establishment in Farnboro, engineers continued to dissect the aircraft long after the first test flights ended. Every week brought new insights, data on airflow, engine management, and structural design that pushed Allied understanding forward. The FW-190 was fast, not only because of its power, but because of its efficiency. German designers had simplified systems wherever possible, reducing weight and maintenance time. British and American teams took notes, sketching ideas that would shape the next generation of fighters. One discovery in particular fascinated them: the modular engine mount. The entire power plant of the FW-190, engine, cowling, propeller, and accessories could be detached as a single unit in under an hour. This meant damaged aircraft could be repaired and returned to the air far faster than Allied equivalents. In a war where air superiority could shift daily, that kind of engineering discipline mattered more than glamour. When American designers later worked on the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, and British engineers refined the Tempest and Typhoon, they borrowed heavily from this approach. Ease of maintenance became a tactical weapon. Combat aircraft were no longer built only to fight, they were built to survive and return. Meanwhile, Luftwaffe command reacted with typical urgency. News of Faber's blunder reached Berlin weeks later, sparking quiet panic. If the Allies had truly captured an intact FW-190, it meant their technological advantage was gone. To compensate, German engineers began accelerating development of new variants, the FW-190, the Dora series, and eventually the Ta-152, a high-altitude interceptor designed to counter the Mustang. These aircraft pushed the design envelope further than ever before: faster, higher, deadlier. But by 1944, it was too late. Germany was losing fuel, pilots, and time. The Allies, armed with the knowledge extracted from that single captured machine, were producing fighters by the thousands. They had turned Faber's mistake into strategy. In the skies over Europe, the difference was unmistakable. RAF squadrons flying Spitfire X's and XIVs now faced the 190s on equal terms. Dogfights that had once ended in disaster for the Allies became hard-fought duels. Mustang units of the 8th Air Force swept deep into German territory, cutting down the Luftwaffe's strength before it could even climb to meet them. For the pilots who had once feared the Butcherbird, the psychological shift was immense. The hunter had become the hunted, yet for all its menace, the FW-190 earned the respect of its enemies. Many Allied aces admitted that flying the captured version had been an education. They admired its solid construction, its balance of speed and toughness. It wasn't beautiful like a Spitfire, nor graceful like a Mustang. It was honest. Built for one purpose and nothing else. Captain Eric Winkle Brown later reflected, it was the most complete single-seat fighter of its day. Everything about it made sense. That acknowledgement from the man who flew more aircraft types than anyone in history was perhaps the ultimate compliment. But the FW-190's legacy extended beyond the battlefield. After the war, its design principles influenced the jet age. When Britain and the United States began testing early jet fighters, many engineers referred to the FW-190's control harmonization and cockpit layout. The concept of intuitive, pilot-centered design, clear sight lines, simple controls, logical instrumentation had begun with German thinking in 1941 and would continue through every aircraft that followed. Even decades later, Aviation historians would trace that lineage, from the 190's clean, purposeful lines to the Sabre, the MiG-15, and beyond. The Butcher Bird had taught the world that efficiency was elegance. For Armin Faber, the man whose navigational mistakes started it all, the years after the war were quiet. He was interrogated, yes, but not vilified. His story was so incredible, so improbable, that even his captors struggled to believe it. Faber spent time in several POW camps before being repatriated to Germany. He rarely spoke publicly about the incident, and when he did, his tone was subdued, a mixture of embarrassment and humility. In one rare interview late in life, he admitted, "I thought I was landing at home. I didn't realize until I saw the blue uniforms." That moment of confusion changed the course of air warfare. By the end of 1945, the FW-190's reign was over, but its legend was secure. More than 20,000 had been built in countless variants, bombers, interceptors, fighter bombers, serving on every front from the Eastern Front to North Africa. Even as Allied pilots gained superiority, none forgot the fear of seeing that broad-wing silhouette flash across their canopy. And for aviation itself, the FW-190 left behind a paradox, an enemy weapon that, once captured, helped its foes win the war. A machine of destruction that became a blueprint for progress. Today, restored FW-190s still fly at air shows, their radial engines roaring with that same deep growl that once echoed over Normandy and the Channel. Crowds look up, watching the ghost of a different era carving arcs across the sky. Most have no idea that one of these very machines once landed by pure accident on a Welsh airfield, rewriting history in the process. As the Butcherbird's shadow passes overhead, it serves as a reminder of something deeper than victory or defeat, that even in the darkest wars, knowledge and curiosity can transform tragedy into understanding. And sometimes, the smallest human mistake, a wrong turn in the clouds, can change the course of the world. Word count, 319. The numbers are impossible to measure. How many lives were changed? How many battles reshaped because one German pilot lost his way above the clouds? A single landing that should never have happened? A machine that was never meant to be captured. And yet, out of that accident came revelation. The Allies didn't just study the Focke-Wulf 190, they learned from it. They learned humility. They learned innovation. They learned that even in war, understanding your enemy can become the key to your own survival. The Butcher Bird that once symbolized fear became a teacher. Its captured wings carried lessons that fueled the Spitfire Mk9, the Mustang, and the jets that would define the next era of flight. It proved that progress often begins where arrogance ends. And somewhere in that truth lies the quiet irony of history, that the same engine of destruction helped forge the machines that brought freedom. If one pilot's mistake could change the skies of Europe, what other secrets of the Second World War still lie hidden, waiting for discovery? Because in the vast chronicle of war, the most powerful stories aren't always written by the victors. Sometimes, they begin with a man who simply turned the wrong way home. So, if you want to keep uncovering the forgotten moments that shaped our world, subscribe. Join us and let's keep bringing history back to life, one untold story at a time.